The star station of Lyris Prime moved like a living thing. Light flowed through wide glass corridors, bending softly as massive stars passed outside. Thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds gathered inside the station, their shapes and colors blending into a slow, careful dance. Some floated, some walked on metal legs, some glided on currents of air created just for them. This was the Galactic Concord's bonding summit. Once every 20 cycles, representatives of advanced civilizations met not to trade weapons or resources, but to form bonds. These bonds were deeper than marriage, stronger than alliance. They joined minds, emotions, and sometimes entire futures. And this cycle, everyone had come for one reason. The hidden princess, Princess Salith of the Orcs' dominion, walked through the inner corridor surrounded by her attendants. Her steps were smooth and silent. A long robe of pale silver fabric flowed around her body, shifting color as she moved. Her hands were calm, folded neatly in front of her. Her face, as always, was completely covered. The veil was not thin cloth. It was a living weave of light and organic crystal, softly glowing, hiding every detail beneath it. No outline of eyes, no hint of expression, just a smooth, gentle curve where a face should be. As she passed, conversations stopped. Beings turned away quickly, pretending not to stare. Others watched her from a distance, fear and curiosity mixing in their eyes. Some made small gestures of respect. Others stepped back, giving her more space than necessary. No one approached her directly. They never did. Salith noticed all of it. She always did. She had learned long ago how to read the silence around her, how to understand the way others avoided standing too close, how their voices lowered when her name was spoken. She felt no anger, only a familiar, heavy loneliness. An attendant leaned closer, her voice gentle. "Princess, the council chamber will open soon." Salith nodded. "Thank you." Her voice was calm, musical, and steady. Anyone listening would have heard kindness in it, but they never listened long enough. Inside the council chamber, the most powerful figures of the Concord were already seated. The chamber was vast and circular, with no single throne higher than the others. This was meant to show equality, though everyone knew power still existed. At the center was the bonding platform, quiet and waiting. Counselor Threx, an old being with skin like folded stone, spoke first. "This summit carries unusual tension." A low murmur followed. Another counselor, tall and thin, with eyes like glass spheres, replied, "Because of the princess." No one disagreed. "For 12 cycles," Threx continued, "Princess Salith has attended. 12 times potential bond candidates have withdrawn, some before the first meeting. Some after a single moment in her presence. None after seeing her face," another counselor added. "Yes," Threx said, "because none have seen it." Across the chamber, Salith stood quietly in her place. She did not look toward the council, but she heard every word. Her species had excellent hearing. She had heard these discussions before. The council spoke of her as if she were a problem to be solved, not a person who was listening. "She is not dangerous," said a counselor from a water-based species. "The data proves that." "And yet," replied another, "entire civilizations have cultural warnings about her kind." Salith's people, the Orcs, were ancient. They evolved not only to speak with sound, but with subtle movements of facial light and pattern. To them, the face was truth itself. Lies were nearly impossible. To other species, those same expressions caused overload. Minds struggled to process so much emotion at once. Fear, awe, rejection, all tangled together. Long ago, the Orcs chose veils to protect others, and in doing so, they isolated themselves. The bonding summit continued as expected. One by one, royal heirs and chosen representatives met, spoke, and began bond trials. Some succeeded. Some failed gently, without shame. When it came time for Princess Salith's name to be announced, the chamber fell silent. "Princess Salith of the Orcs' dominion," the herald called. No one stepped forward. Several candidates avoided looking at her position. One being, tall and armored, shifted uncomfortably, then slowly shook their head. Another quietly activated a translation field and whispered an apology meant only for the council. Salith stood still. She felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the quiet understanding that once again she would return home unbonded. Her people would accept it without blame. They always did. But the loneliness would remain. Then something unexpected happened. A human stood up. He was seated far from the center among the newer member species. Humans were still unusual here, tall, soft-skinned, with no natural armor, claws, or light displays. They wore simple clothing and relied heavily on technology. His name was Elias Ward. He was not a prince or military leader. He was a cultural liaison, chosen because humans were good at listening. At least that was what the conquered believed. Elias felt his heart beating fast as he rose from his seat. He had not planned this. When he arrived at the summit, he had read the briefings like everyone else. He knew about the hidden princess, the failed bonds, the warnings. He knew that humans were not expected to participate deeply in bonding yet. But he had watched her walk through the station. He had noticed how others stepped away, and something about that felt wrong. Elias cleared his throat. His voice sounded louder than he expected. "I would like to request permission to conduct a preliminary bond interview." The chamber reacted instantly. Voices rose. Translation fields struggled to keep up. Several counselors leaned forward in disbelief. "A human," someone whispered. Counselor Threx turned slowly toward Elias. "Representative Ward, you are aware of the risks." Elias nodded. "I am. You understand that once initiated, a bond interview cannot be interrupted without psychological consequence." "Yes," Elias said. His hands were shaking slightly, but he kept them at his sides. "And you understand," Threx continued, "that your species has no recorded compatibility with the Orals." Elias hesitated for just a moment. Then he said, "No species has." That stopped the room again. Salith turned her head slightly toward him. The veil hid her expression, but her attention was fully on the human now. Threx studied Elias carefully. "Why?" Elias took a slow breath. He searched for the right words, knowing he was speaking not just for himself, but for humanity. "Because," he said, "I don't think fear should decide who gets a chance." A long silence followed. Some counselors looked offended, others thoughtful. A few looked amused, as if watching a fragile creature walk toward a storm. Finally, Threx spoke. "Princess Salith, do you accept this request?" All eyes turned to her. Salith's heart beat faster than it had in many cycles. She had been rejected so many times that hope felt dangerous. Humans were new, unstudied, emotionally intense according to reports. If this failed, it would be another mark against her. But if she refused, nothing would ever change. "I accept," she said. Her voice did not shake. The chamber erupted again, louder this time. Some protested, others demanded safeguards. The council ordered a delay, insisting on medical scans and consent confirmations. Elias was escorted to a preparation chamber where human specialists checked his neural implants and stress levels. They asked him repeatedly if he wanted to withdraw. He said no every time. Alone for a moment, Elias sat on the edge of a bench and stared at his hands. "What am I doing?" he whispered. He thought of Earth, of noisy cities, crowded trains, people brushing past each other every day without fear of emotional overload. Humans lived surrounded by faces, angry, joyful, tired, honest, fake. Maybe that was why he felt this was possible. Or maybe he was making a mistake. In another chamber, Salith stood as attendants adjusted the energy field around her veil. Her breathing was slow, controlled. "Princess," one attendant said softly, "you are not required to proceed." "I know," Salith replied. "You have nothing to prove." Salith looked down at her hands. "I am tired of being something to be avoided." The attendant said nothing more. The bonding chamber was prepared. Soft light filled the space, tuned carefully to avoid overwhelming any participant. Observation panels allowed the council to monitor without intruding. Elias entered first. The chamber felt warm, almost comforting. He stood near the center, trying to steady his breathing. When Salith entered from the opposite side, the air seemed to change. Not dramatically, but enough that Elias noticed. A quiet pressure like standing near something important. They stopped a respectful distance apart. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Elias did something no one had ever done before. He bowed slightly. It was not part of conquered protocol. It was human, simple, respectful, imperfect. "Princess Salith," he said, "thank you for meeting with me." Salith was surprised. "You are welcome," she replied. They looked at each other, or rather, Elias looked at the veil. "I want to say this clearly," Elias continued. "I am not here to ask you to remove it." Salith's breath caught. Many had promised that before, few meant it. "You may," she said carefully, "ask anything else." Elias nodded. "Then I would like to know, what do you enjoy?" The question was so unexpected that Salith laughed softly before she could stop herself. The sound echoed gently through the chamber. "I enjoy star music," she said after a moment, "and old stories." and quiet places where no one expects anything from me. Elias smiled. Those are good things. They began to talk, not about bonds or politics, but about worlds, about how humans feared the dark and yet traveled into space anyway. About how the Orals measured time by emotional memory rather than stars. The council watched in silence. Sensors showed no spikes, no distress, only steady conversation. For the first time in many cycles, Princess Salith felt something unfamiliar, not hope, but possibility. And Elias, sitting across from a being the galaxy feared, realized that whatever happened next, he would not regret staying. They expected signs, panic, confusion, emotional shutdown. They expected the human to fail in the same quiet way all others had failed. But the chamber remained steady. The light stayed soft. The air stayed calm. The sensors showed normal patterns. Elias and Salith continued speaking until the allotted preliminary time ran out. When a gentle tone signaled the end, Elias stopped at once, even though he felt like he had only just begun to understand her. He rose slowly. "Thank you for giving me time." Salith stood as well. Her hands returned to their calm position, fingers lightly folded. "You did not treat me like a rumor." Elias swallowed. He did not know how to answer without sounding too serious, so he used the simplest truth he had. "You are not a rumor," he said. "You are a person." For a moment, Salith said nothing. Then she replied, quieter than before, "Most people forget that." The door opened. The observation panel dimmed. The first session ended without drama. That alone felt like a shock to the conquered. Outside the chamber, council staff moved quickly, speaking in low voices. Data screens flashed. Translator drones hovered near Elias and Salith, ready to interpret, but there was little to interpret. There had been no dangerous words, no threats, no ritual provocation, just conversation. Still, the council was unsettled. Counselor Threx called for an immediate review. Elias was escorted to a side room where human medical staff waited with devices that looked like simple bands and small lights. Salith was guided to a quiet suite surrounded by her attendants and Orales specialists. Elias sat on a padded chair while a human doctor checked his eyes and pupils, then his pulse. "Any dizziness?" she asked. "A little," Elias admitted, "but mostly it feels like I ran a long distance with my brain." The doctor gave a short breath that might have been a laugh. "That is not a clinical description, but I understand it." Another specialist, older with gray hair and tired eyes, leaned closer. "Elias, you need to be honest. You are not doing this to prove humans are special, are you?" Elias looked down at his hands again. The shaking had reduced, but he still felt energy in his fingers like he had touched an electrical field. "I don't know," he said softly. "I didn't plan it. I watched everyone avoid her, and she didn't do anything wrong, she just existed." The older specialist nodded slowly. "That is a dangerous reason and a good reason at the same time." Elias looked up. "Is it a bad idea?" The specialist paused. "It is an unknown idea, and unknown things become dangerous when people try to control them." Elias understood that. This summit was full of control, ritual rules, safeguards, polite speeches hiding sharp fear. But he also felt something else. He felt that Salith had been controlled for so long that even kindness felt like a rebellion. When the medical staff finished, Elias was cleared for continued participation. But clearance was not permission. The council still had to decide whether he was allowed to proceed to the next stage. The council chamber was louder than before. A counselor with feathers that shifted through colors flicked their wings sharply. "This is reckless. Humans are newly admitted. Their neural patterns are volatile." Counselor Threx's deep voice rolled across the chamber. "Volatile does not mean incompatible." Another counselor, whose body floated inside a clear sphere of fluid, replied, "Or it could mean the opposite. Volatile minds might collapse more easily." A third counselor, small and insect-like, clicked their mandibles. "Then why did he not collapse in the interview?" "Because the princess did not show her face," someone replied quickly, as if that solved everything. Threx lifted one hand. "The purpose of the preliminary interview is not to complete the bond. It is to judge readiness. We saw no readiness failures." "But you saw something else," the feathered counselor said. "You saw an emotional connection forming." Several counselors shifted. That was the point they did not like to say out loud. A bond could begin long before the formal ritual. That was why the rule existed. Once initiated, you could not withdraw easily. Minds would reach for each other, and separation would become pain. Threx looked toward the Orales delegation area. Princess Salith, do you have concerns about continuing with Representative Ward? Salith stood behind her veil in perfect stillness, but her voice carried clearly. I have concerns, she said, but not about him. The chamber waited. My concern, she continued, is that this summit will treat him like an experiment. I will not allow him to be harmed by politics. The word harmed hung in the air. It was not violence she meant, but pressure, consequences, blame. Elias was not in the chamber to hear this, but the statement was recorded, repeated, and quietly spread across the station. Salith had spoken with protectiveness. That was new. Threx nodded once. Then the council will proceed with caution. The vote was taken. It was not unanimous, but it passed. Elias Ward would be permitted to enter the second stage, cultural compatibility review, followed by a controlled resonance trial. When Elias received the news, he exhaled so hard he almost laughed. His relief surprised him. He had told himself he was calm. He had told himself he was ready to accept refusal. But now he understood something about himself. Once he stepped toward Salith, he did not want to step away. He was given a simple schedule and rules. He was also given a warning. A conquered counselor met him in a quiet corridor where the glass walls revealed a giant ringed planet outside. The counselor was a tall being with a smooth face and a voice like soft metal. Representative Ward, you have done something unusual. That attracts attention. I've noticed, Elias said. The counselor's eyes narrowed slightly. Attention can become pressure. Pressure can become conflict. Are you prepared to be disliked by important people? Elias stared at the planet outside, the rings like pale lines drawn by a careful hand. He thought of Salith walking through corridors while people stepped away. He thought of what it must feel like to be disliked without having done anything. I can handle dislike, he said. I grew up on Earth. The counselor did not react to the joke, only studied him. Humans use humor to regulate fear. Sometimes, Elias admitted, and sometimes you use it to hide what you truly feel. Elias had no answer to that. The counselor leaned closer. Do not continue if your main reason is to be seen as brave. Bravery turns into pride. Pride turns into mistakes. Elias nodded slowly. My reason is I don't want her to be alone. The counselor paused, then stepped back. That reason is less dangerous than pride. It is still dangerous. Then the counselor walked away, leaving Elias with the echo of that sentence. Later, Salith sat in her private suite, surrounded by light that mimicked the dawn of her home world. Her attendants moved quietly, preparing ceremonial items and communication devices. But Salith did not focus on any of it. She kept hearing Elias' voice in her mind. You are not a rumor, you are a person. It was simple, it should not have mattered. But it did. Her chief attendant, an older Oralis named Lethira, approached with careful steps. You are thinking too loudly, Lethira said gently, speaking in their private language first, then allowing translation to carry it. Salith tilted her head slightly. Am I? Lethira's eyes softened. Even though Salith's veil hid her face, the Oralis could read her posture, the delicate shifts in her hands, the tiny tensions in her shoulders. You have not moved like this in a long time, Lethira said. You move like someone who remembers what hope feels like. Salith's fingers tightened for a moment, then relaxed. Hope feels unsafe. Yes, Lethira agreed, because it makes you imagine a future, and imagining a future makes disappointment sharper. Salith stared at the glowing wall that showed a simulation of her home sky. He was not afraid. Lethira sat across from her, leaving respectful space. Humans fear many things, they just do not always fear the same things we do. Why? Salith asked quietly. Lethira considered. Perhaps because humans have lived with emotional noise for so long that silence feels stranger to them than intensity. Salith did not answer. She remembered the times other candidates came close, asked polite questions, then withdrew quickly. She remembered their stiff bodies, the way they avoided even looking at her veil. Elias had looked at her veil, yes, but he looked the way someone looked at a locked door, not with disgust, but with curiosity and respect for what was behind it, and he had not demanded entry. That alone felt like trust, but trust could be fragile. The second stage would not be as simple as conversation. It would involve shared memory simulation, cultural resonance mapping, and emotional translation calibration. All things that could expose differences and misunderstandings. If Elias failed, the conquered would not blame him quietly. They would blame her existence. The next day, the station's central hall filled with observers. Not all were council members, some were scientists. Some were diplomats, some were simply curious. The story had spread fast. The hidden princess. The human who dared. Elias walked through the hall toward the compatibility chamber. He could feel eyes on him. He tried to ignore them, but the weight was real. He was used to being noticed sometimes. Humans were still rare here, but this was different. This was a kind of watching that expected a result. He passed a group of beings with long necks and jeweled skin. Their whispering was not fully masked by translation fields. One session means nothing. He will fail like all others. Perhaps humans are too primitive to understand the danger. Elias kept walking. He reminded himself that he did not need to prove anything. He only needed to be honest. He only needed to show up. When he reached the chamber, he found Salith already there, standing near the far wall. She looked like a quiet moon in a room of light. Elias stopped at a respectful distance again. "Good morning." Salith turned slightly toward him. "Good morning, Elias Ward." Hearing his full name from her voice sent a strange warmth through him. It felt formal and yet personal. A conquered technician stepped forward and explained the process in flat, careful tones. Stage 2 includes cultural resonance scanning and memory reflection. You will be asked to share a short sequence of personal memory, voluntarily selected. The system will translate emotional meaning into basic patterns that both minds can process safely. Elias listened closely. "Safely," he repeated. The technician nodded. "As safely as possible." "The system will stop if there is overload," Salith's voice came calm, "or if the council chooses to stop it." The technician did not respond to that. They were both guided to opposite sides of a circular platform. The platform was surrounded by quiet instruments and soft fields of light. It looked less like a sacred ritual and more like a medical procedure, which made Elias uneasy. Bonds were supposed to be human, not mechanical, but perhaps this was the only way to protect minds. Elias stepped onto his marker. Salith stepped onto hers. A gentle tone sounded. The scanning began. At first, Elias felt nothing. Then he felt a small pull, like a breeze inside his thoughts. Images tried to rise without his choosing. The system was asking his mind, "What are you made of?" He had been told to select one memory beforehand. Something simple, something safe, something not too intense. He had chosen a memory from his childhood, a warm kitchen, his grandmother stirring a pot, the smell of spices. The sound of rain against the window, his grandmother humming a song that had no words, just comfort. He remembered feeling safe even when the world outside felt loud. The memory rose clearly. The system captured it. Elias felt it leave him slightly, as if he had placed it carefully on a table for someone else to see. Across the platform, Salith stood still. The veil glowed faintly as the system translated the memory into emotional patterns she could receive without seeing his face or touching his mind directly. Salith's posture shifted. Elias watched her hands. They loosened. Her shoulders lowered. A soft voice came through the translator field. "Warmth," Salith said, almost to herself. "Small shelter, a sound that means someone is near." Elias blinked. "Yes," he said softly, "that's what it was." Salith did not respond immediately. Then she said, "Your memory has softness." Elias let out a small breath. "I'm glad." Now it was her turn. The technician spoke. "Princess Salith, please release one selected memory into the reflection field." Salith remained still for a longer moment. Elias wondered if she would refuse. She had every right to. She did not owe this summit any part of herself. But slowly the veil brightened. The system's field shimmered. A memory formed. Elias felt it arrive not as pictures first, but as emotion. A wide, quiet sorrow like standing under a night sky that never ends. Then images came. He saw a large hall of pale stone and light. He saw young Salith, smaller, her robe shorter, her veil newly placed. He sensed the feeling of the veil for the first time. Its weight not heavy physically, but heavy in meaning. He heard voices around her, not cruel but careful, adults speaking softly, saying the words of protection. He understood without being told she was not being punished. She was being sealed away for the comfort of others. Then he saw a moment where a child from her own people reached toward her veil, curious, a gentle hand. And a parent pulled the child back quickly, not in anger, but in fear of what outsiders would think if Orali's children touched the hidden princess too freely. The memory ended with Salith alone in a quiet room, looking into a mirror that reflected only glowing veil light. Elias' throat tightened. He did not feel overwhelmed the way other species might, but he felt something else, a deep ache. The system captured the memory and softened it, making it safe to receive. but even softened, it carried truth. Elias spoke without thinking. "That's not fair." The technician raised a hand, warning him not to disrupt the process, but Salith's voice came quickly, calm and clear. "Fairness is a human idea," she said. Elias shook his head slightly. "No, it's a person idea." Silence followed. The scanners continued, but the room felt different now. The observers behind the panels were quiet, even they could sense the shift. This was no longer just data, this was connection. Stage 2 continued. The system asked for cultural resonance points, small values and instincts that shaped behavior. It asked how they handled conflict, Elias answered. Talk, then walk away if needed. It asked how they handled shame, Elias answered honestly. Humans carried it, sometimes too long. It asked what they believed love meant, Elias paused, then said, showing up even when it's hard. Salith answered from her culture, duty, clarity, emotional truth, responsibility to the whole. Orals did not hide their hearts from each other, but they had learned to hide them from everyone else. As the answers flowed, the system began to map them. On a screen, shapes formed, patterns of compatibility, not perfect alignment but surprising overlap. The technicians whispered among themselves. A council observer leaned forward behind the glass. Elias did not look at the screens. He looked at Salith's posture, at the gentle angle of her head when she listened. He realized he had started to recognize her in the way humans recognized each other, not by face alone, but by presence. When the scanning ended, a soft chime signaled completion. The platform dimmed. The technician spoke with cautious amazement. Compatibility resonance has reached threshold. A low wave of sound moved through the observation room. Threshold meant something important. It meant the next stage could be approved. It meant the controlled resonance trial could begin. Salith stepped off the platform first. Elias followed, feeling lightheaded, not from overload, but from the strange intimacy of sharing memory and receiving hers. They were guided to a waiting area while the council reviewed results. The waiting room was quiet, with simple seats and a window looking out into space. Far away, a cluster of stars glittered like scattered salt. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Elias said quietly, "Thank you for sharing that." Salith's voice came soft. "It was not easy." "I know," Elias said. He hesitated, then added, "If you want, you don't have to continue." Salith turned her veiled face toward him. "You would allow me to end it," she said, "even if you have already been named the brave human?" Elias flushed slightly. The word brave sounded heavy, like clothing he did not choose. "I don't want to be brave," he admitted. "I want to be decent." Salith's hands moved slightly, a gesture that could have meant many things. Curiosity, caution thought. "You do not ask to see me," she said. Elias looked at the floor, then back up. "I want to see you," he said honestly, "but I want you to choose when, and I want you to know that if you never choose it, I can still treat you like you're real." Salith's breathing changed. It was subtle, but Elias noticed. The air around her veil shimmered faintly as if responding to her emotion. "My face is not only a face," Salith said. "It is language, it is history, it is what my people are. When I show it, I cannot control what you receive." Elias nodded slowly. "Then I'll prepare to receive it, not control it." Salith was quiet again. Then she said, "Humans are strange." Elias gave a small smile. "We get that a lot." A council message arrived through a hovering device. The tone was formal. The decision had been made. They were approved for the controlled resonance trial. Elias felt his stomach tighten. Salith did not move, but something in her stillness sharpened. The controlled resonance trial was not full bonding, but it was close. It involved a temporary, carefully limited connection between their neural fields, a brief joining of sensation and emotional meaning, a test of whether their minds could touch without injury. And it could not be done without bringing Salith closer to unveiling the true shape of her identity. They were escorted to a new chamber, smaller than the bonding hall but more precise. The floor was marked with soft circles. The air had a faint scent, calming for most species. Technicians explained again, "You will stand within the field. The resonance will begin. You may speak. You may stop if you experience distress. The system will cut the connection if overload is detected." Salith's voice was quiet but sharp. "And if the council decides the data is valuable enough, will you cut it then?" The technician hesitated. "Princess, the council has—" "Do not answer," Salith said. "I already know the truth." Elias looked at her, surprised by the firmness. He realized she had spent her whole life learning how to speak politely while being controlled. Now, with the human present, she allowed herself a little more honesty. That honesty made him respect her more. They stepped into the field. The resonance began like a gentle hum under the skin. Elias felt warmth in his chest, then a widening sensation in his thoughts, like a door opening inside his mind. He did not see images yet. He felt presence. Across from him, Salith's veil glowed brighter, responding to the field. The light patterns were not random. They moved like slow breathing, like ocean currents. Elias realized suddenly that the veil was not only hiding her. It was also expressing her in a limited way, the only way the galaxy allowed her to be seen. The hum grew slightly stronger. Elias felt a touch of emotion that was not his, carefully held, controlled, trained. Loneliness shaped into elegance. Fear shaped into dignity. Hope buried under layers of duty. Salith's voice came through the field, softer now. "Do you feel it?" Elias swallowed. "Yes. What do you feel?" she asked. Elias searched for simple words. "I feel like you've been holding your breath for a long time." Silence. Then Salith's shoulders lowered just a fraction. The resonance deepened. Now Elias felt more than emotion. He felt faint sensory impressions, cool air, pale light, the sensation of standing in a room where everyone watches you like you might break them. His eyes stung slightly. He forced himself to breathe slowly to stay grounded. He remembered his grandmother's kitchen. He remembered warmth. He remembered that he was allowed to be human. Salith's voice trembled for the first time. "No one has stayed this long." Elias spoke carefully, like walking across thin ice without wanting to crack it. "I'm here." The field hummed louder. A warning light blinked on a technician panel, not red but amber, not danger yet but attention. Elias felt the pull increase. His mind wanted to reach further. The system was limiting the connection, but human curiosity did not like limits. He held back by choice, not because he was forced. He spoke quickly, softly. "Salith, if this becomes too much, say so. I will stop." She turned her veiled face toward him. "You would stop for me," she said, "even if the council demands you continue." Elias' jaw tightened. He understood the test was not only mental, it was political. "Yes," he said, "I would stop." For a moment the resonance steadied, as if the field itself approved of that answer. Then something changed. The veil's light shifted in a pattern Elias had not seen before. It was faster, brighter, like a sudden wave. Technicians stiffened. Sensors spiked, still within limits, but climbing. Salith's breathing quickened. Elias felt it before he understood it. A door inside Salith had moved. A lock that had been held closed by fear and habit had loosened. Not fully opened, but enough to let a stronger truth leak through. Elias suddenly felt a sharp, clear emotion that did not belong to him. Not fear, not shame. A powerful longing, the longing to be seen. It hit him like bright sunlight after years underground. He gasped, not because it hurt, but because it was intense. The amber warning light brightened. A technician's voice came tense. "Resonance rising, stabilize." Elias did the only thing he could think of. He grounded himself again, not by resisting Salith, but by offering something steady back into the field. He spoke clear and calm. "Salith, you are safe with me." Salith's voice came like a whisper. "You cannot promise that." Elias' eyes filled. He kept his tone simple. "I can promise I won't run." The resonance trembled, then steadied slightly. The amber light dimmed a fraction. Behind the glass, council members watched with expressions that could not be fully translated. Interest, concern, calculation. Salith stood very still, as if she feared any movement would break the balance. Elias felt her presence in his mind like a melody he was only starting to understand. Then Salith spoke words that made the entire room feel colder, even with warm light. "If you continue," she said, "you will reach the edge of what the veil can protect you from." Elias' throat tightened. "What's beyond it?" Salith's hands trembled slightly. "Me." The technicians began to speak, preparing to pause the trial, but the council's signal came through their devices. "Continue," the signal said. Elias looked at Salith through glowing air and careful science. He knew the council wanted data. He knew politics would try to turn this into a spectacle, but he also knew that Salith had just admitted something deeply personal, the longing to be seen. No one else had earned the right to hear that. He made his decision. He lifted his hand slightly, palm open in a human gesture of peace and honesty. "Then let's go slowly," he said. "Not for them, for us." Salith's breath caught again. The field hummed, and in that moment the veil's light shifted one more time, as if responding to the word "us." The chamber lights dimmed slightly, automatically adjusting to new resonance levels. The technicians stared at their screens, because the readings were doing something they had never recorded before. The system was beginning to treat them as a pair, not as two participants. As a connection, and the council watching behind glass understood it too. This was no longer just a test. Something real had started, and if it continued, the next stage would not be a simple trial. It would demand the one thing the entire galaxy feared: the face. The true language of the Orals. The final warning light flickered amber again, brighter than before, and the technician's voice went tight with urgency. "Princess Salith," the technician said, "the Veil interface is responding to resonance." "If the pattern continues, the Veil may," Salith cut him off, voice steady but shaken. "I know," Elias whispered, barely audible. "Do you want to stop?" Salith stood silent for a long moment. Then she answered, so quietly that only the resonance field carried it clearly. "No." The hum deepened, and the Veil's glow began to change in a way no one in the Conquered had ever seen. The chamber felt smaller as the resonance continued. Not because the walls moved, but because attention pressed inward from every direction. The light dimmed and softened again, adjusting itself in small, careful steps. The hum beneath the floor deepened, steady but alive, like a held breath that refused to escape. Elias stood very still. He had learned in the last few moments that stillness was not emptiness. It was choice. His body wanted to react, to step forward, to reach out, to speak too quickly. He resisted all of it, not because he was afraid, but because he understood something important now. Salith did not need him to rush. She needed him to stay. Across from him, Salith's veil glowed in slow, shifting patterns. The light was no longer smooth and even. It moved with emotion, responding to the resonance field and to Elias himself. It was beautiful in a quiet way, but it also carried tension, like glass under pressure. The technicians whispered urgently behind their stations. Their hands hovered over controls, ready to cut the connection if the readings crossed a line. The council members behind the glass watched without speaking. Even they seemed unsure whether they wanted the trial to continue or end. This was no longer something they fully controlled. Salith spoke again, her voice calm but layered with effort. "Elias?" "Yes," he answered at once. "You are closer now," she said. "Closer than anyone has been." Elias swallowed. "I know. If you continue," she said, "you will not only receive emotion, you will receive truth. My people do not separate the two." "I understand," Elias said, though he knew he could not fully understand yet. Understanding would come after, not before. The veil pulsed brighter for a moment, then dimmed. The resonance field adjusted, narrowing slightly, as if trying to protect both of them from too much at once. Salith took a slow breath. Elias felt it inside his own chest, not as a physical breath, but as a shared rhythm. That alone told him how close they already were. "I have a question," Salith said. "Ask," Elias replied. "Why do you not look away?" she asked. "Others do. Even when they are polite, their minds pull back. Yours does not." Elias thought carefully before answering. He wanted his words to be true, not impressive. "Because," he said slowly, "if I look away now, I would be doing the same thing everyone else did to you. And I don't want to be another person who leaves a mark like that." Salith was quiet. The veil's light softened, shifting into slower, wider patterns. The resonance steadied again. Behind the glass, a counselor leaned toward another and whispered, "He is stabilizing her." "No," the other replied softly. "They are stabilizing each other." The technicians noticed it too. The warning indicators flickered, then calmed. The system adjusted its models, recalculating risk. No model had been built for this. The resonance deepened again, gently this time. Elias felt more of Salith's presence in his mind. Not as images yet, but as meaning. He felt what it was like to walk through halls where every step was watched. He felt the careful control she maintained every moment, the way she measured her words, her posture, even her silence. He also felt pride. Quiet, steady pride in her people, in their long history, in their commitment to emotional truth even when it cost them connection. Salith felt Elias too. She felt the rough edges of human thought, the way his emotions did not line up neatly. Fear sat beside curiosity. Care sat beside uncertainty, but none of it was hidden. Humans, she realized, were not emotionally simple. They were emotionally open in a way her people had forgotten how to be. It made them resilient and dangerous and safe all at once. Salith's hands trembled again. She steadied them, placing one hand over the other. The resonance field responded, smoothing slightly. Elias, she said quietly, the veil was never meant to be permanent. Elias' heart skipped. He kept his voice steady. What was it meant to be? A bridge, she said, a way to protect others while we learned how to meet them halfway. And did it work? Elias asked. For others, she said, not for me. The words carried no bitterness, only fact. The hum in the chamber changed pitch slightly. The system registered a new pattern, unfamiliar but not unstable. The technicians exchanged looks. One of them shook their head slowly, disbelief clear on their face. This shouldn't be possible, they whispered. Salith took another breath. This one was deeper, heavier. Elias felt it more strongly, like a tide pulling at him. The veil responds to choice, Salith said. Not commands, not fear, choice. Elias nodded slowly. Then choose what you want. Salith's voice softened even more. I want to be known. The words settled between them, heavy and fragile. Elias felt tears sting his eyes, surprising him. He did not wipe them away. He let them be. Humans cried. It was not weakness, it was release. I want to know you, he said. Not own you, not explain you, just know you. The resonance surged again, stronger than before, but not chaotic. It felt like alignment rather than collision. The amber warning light flared briefly, then steadied instead of turning red. The technicians stared. One of them spoke into the council channel, voice low and tense. The system is adapting. It's treating this as mutual regulation. Counselor Threx's deep voice came through the channel, controlled but strained. Is there danger? There is risk, the technician replied, but not the kind we prepared for. Salith lifted her chin slightly. The veil's light shifted again, becoming more transparent in places, less solid. The patterns grew clearer, more detailed. Elias noticed and felt his breath catch. He did not step closer. He did not reach out. He stayed exactly where he was. Salith noticed that too. If I continue, she said, you will begin to perceive my face, not fully, not yet, but enough that you cannot unlearn it. Elias nodded once. I understand. And if you are harmed by it, she said, I will carry that forever. Elias shook his head gently. You won't harm me by being yourself. Salith's breath shook for the first time since the trial began. The resonance field brightened. A soft tone sounded. A system alert, not a warning, but a threshold marker. The technicians recognized it instantly. That's a partial unveiling marker, one of them whispered. Partial unveiling was theoretical. It had never been observed. Orali's veils were designed to remain fully opaque unless intentionally removed in a full bonding ritual. But this was not a ritual. This was something else. Salith's veil shimmered, the light thinning like mist. Shapes began to form beneath it, not clear details, but impressions. Elias could sense depth where there had been smooth surface before. He could sense eyes, not visually yet, but emotionally. Awareness meeting awareness. His heart pounded. He grounded himself again, focusing on his breath, on the feel of the floor beneath his feet, on the memory of warmth and safety he had shared earlier. He offered that steadiness into the field without words. Salith felt it and leaned into it carefully. The veil thinned further. Elias felt a sudden rush of information, not images, but meaning compressed into sensation. He felt Salith's emotions sharpen and clarify. Her restraint loosened just enough to let something reel through. He felt her intelligence, precise and deep. He felt her compassion, disciplined but vast. He felt her fear, not of him, but of being misunderstood again. It was intense. Elias gasped softly. The technicians tensed. The amber light flickered again. Salith spoke quickly, her voice urgent but controlled. Elias, speak to me, anchor me. Elias did not hesitate. He spoke from instinct, from the most human place in him. You're here, he said. I'm here, we're breathing, nothing is breaking. The words were simple. They were enough. The resonance steadied again. Salith's shoulders relaxed a fraction. The veil continued to thin, but more slowly now, responding to the new balance. Behind the glass, the council was silent. They were watching a bond form without ceremony, without permission, without fear driving it. It challenged everything they believed about control. The system chimed softly again. Another threshold reached. Elias could now perceive Salith's face not as an image, but as presence. He could sense where her eyes were, the way her attention focused on him, the subtle emotional color of her expression. It was overwhelming, not painful, just full. Tears slid down Elias' cheeks. He let them fall. I can feel you, he said, voice rough. It's a lot. But it's okay, Salith's voice trembled. Most cannot say that. I'm not most, Elias replied. A quiet sound escaped Salith then, not quite a laugh, not quite a sob, something in between. "You are strange," she said again, but this time the word carried warmth. The veil thinned further. Now faint visual hints reached Elias' mind, not sharp details but soft shapes. Light patterns arranged with meaning. A face not built like a human face but beautiful in its own structure, alive with emotional clarity. He felt awe rise in him. He did not try to analyze it, he simply accepted it. The system struggled to keep up. Its models adjusted again, rewriting limits in real time. A technician whispered, "The veil is no longer blocking, it's translating." Counselor Threx's voice came low and steady. "Can it be stopped safely?" The technician hesitated. "Yes, but it may cause harm now if we force it." That was the moment the council realized something had shifted. Stopping the trial was no longer the safe choice. Salith spoke again, her voice stronger now. "Ilias, I need to know something." "Anything," he said. "If I show you more," she said, "if you truly see me, will you still speak to me the way you do now?" Ilias did not answer immediately. He thought of how easy it would be to say yes without thinking. He knew promises made too quickly often broke, so he answered honestly. "I don't know exactly how I'll feel," he said, "but I know I won't turn you into something less than a person. I won't turn away just because it's intense." Salith absorbed that answer. It was not perfect. It was real. "That is enough," she said. The veil responded. Light poured outward, not in a flash, but in a slow, unfolding bloom. The translation layer adapted, shaping the information so Elias' mind could receive it without fracture. Now he saw her. Not fully, not in sharp detail, but clearly enough that there was no doubt. Her face was luminous, structured in elegant complexity. Patterns of light and subtle movement flowed across it, expressing emotion with precision and beauty. Her eyes, large, deep, layered with color beyond human range, met his awareness directly. There was no madness, no fear, only truth. Elias' breath caught hard in his chest. He swayed slightly, then steadied himself. Salith watched him closely, every shift in his emotion reflected in the light of her face. "Elias," she whispered, "what do you see?" Elias' voice broke. "I see someone who has been alone for too long and someone who deserves to be seen." The resonance peaked. The warning lights flared, then went dark. The system fell silent, not failed, quiet. The technicians froze. The council held its breath. Salith's veil stabilized in its new state, no longer fully opaque, no longer fully removed. A living balance between protection and openness. Elias stood trembling, tears on his face, heart racing, mind full but intact. He was still himself. Salith was still herself. They were connected but not consumed. Salith let out a long, shaking breath. "You are still here." Elias laughed softly through tears. "I told you I wouldn't run." She stepped forward then, just one step. The chamber felt like it shifted around them. Elias did not move back. They stood closer now than they ever had before, the resonance field humming quietly around them like a shared heartbeat. Behind the glass, a counselor whispered, "This changes everything." Threx said nothing. His ancient eyes were fixed on the pair. Salith spoke softly, her voice filled with something new. "The next stage cannot be undone." Elias wiped his face with the back of his hand, smiling weakly. "Neither can this." Salith tilted her head, studying him, truly studying him. Then she said words no one in the Conquered expected to hear from the hidden princess. "Then let us choose it, together." The resonance responded with a soft, steady glow. And the galaxy, watching through glass and data, realized it was witnessing something it had never planned for. Not a bond forced by ritual. Not a connection born of fear, but two beings choosing to meet each other without hiding. And the next step would not just change their lives. It would change how the galaxy understood connection itself.